Hello, beautiful people. I am so glad you're here. Welcome to your Spiritual Guru podcast. I'm your host and spiritual guru, Erin. I've been on my own spiritual journey for the past 2 years, and it's an honor to walk beside you as you navigate through your own. This podcast is for anyone who is wanting to do inner work, get more in tune with themselves, heal past traumas, and find their inner power. If that's you, then sit tight because this is going to get deep. You ready? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to your Spiritual Guru podcast. This episode is going to be a little bit different in that this is actually an interview that's hosted by a really good friend of mine, Lex Shipley. She actually has her own podcast, which I've mentioned before on this show before. Her podcast is called Your Personal Hype Girl. And this interview is all about my experience with and after an abusive relationship. You know, I've mentioned that time period before with y'all on my show, and you know, for those of you who are new, I kind of go through the whole process, you know, and the whole timeline and everything. But for those of you who have been with me for a while or since the beginning of the podcast, you might hear some things in there that you've already heard, but I promise you there's some information in there that y'all have not heard yet. So whether you're new here or you've been with me from the beginning, I'm sure you are going to get something out of this episode, or at least I hope you will. So without further ado, let's get into the interview.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the show. I am so happy you are here. Today's episode is a little extra special because I have one of my good friends joining me for an interview. Her name is Erin, and we've actually known each other since 2017. So we've known each other for a hot minute, and I've not only had the privilege of being her friend, but I've also gotten to be her business partner, her business mentor. I feel like we've done a lot of growing together, both in regular life and in our entrepreneurial goals. And I just think that this episode is going to be really fantastic. And so I wanted to give you guys a little introduction to who Erin is before we hop into this show. So Erin is a 30-year-old single mama to her amazing almost 4-year-old daughter. She actually has her own podcast called Your Spiritual Guru, where she talks about chakras, healing, inner work, and the journey to self-awareness. She's worked in retail for 10 plus years, but within the last few, she decided to follow her dream career instead. She is currently a firefighter EMT and starts school to become a paramedic this week. So how phenomenal is that? She is passionate about helping others, adding value to their lives, and helping them to become the best versions of themselves. Erin is joining us today to share her experiences of living with and co-parenting with a narcissist, life as a single mother, and navigating all things life. So, like I said, this is going to be a really incredible interview. It's going to be a super juicy episode. So, find somewhere comfy, get settled, and we're going to dive right in. Hi, Erin.
Hey!
Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're so welcome. I'm so excited for this. I've been waiting for this for a while.
I am literally so happy to have you here because your story, and I know I've said this to you a million times, this is not new information, but your story has impacted me in so many different ways. I think your story is going to impact my listeners. And so I'm really excited for them to hear from you. Tell me, so we're talking about co-parenting and being in a relationship with a narcissist. Can we kind of start from the beginning of how that relationship even began?
Okay, well, so if I'm thinking of the beginning, I was, let me see, this was about 2015. So I was 22, I believe. I was in college, so just to set the scene, I was in college. I was in a city away from home. That, you know, I've only at that point been in for maybe 4 years. You know, I just turned 21 the year before, so I'm like going out experiencing, you know, the downtown life and all of those things. And, you know, I'm working part-time, well, actually full-time, on top of my schooling. And, the place that I worked at the time was a jewelry store. And I, you know, saw this gentleman. He was a coworker of mine. And from the minute I saw him, I was just like, I said to myself, that's the type of man, like, that's my type, just, appearance wise.
Sure.
But at the same time, at that time, he was involved with someone, I was involved with someone. But, we just kind of talked throughout the course of like our, coworker ship, I guess you'd call it. And we just kind of like started getting closer that way. He was very, very charming. Long story short, there was a time where both of us were single, and that charming aspect, just I just remember it being so like, I, charming is the best way that I can put it in the beginning. He would show up to my door with flowers. He would take me out on a date, and he would bring flowers every time he came to my house, and just that kind of alluring sense of like validation and interest, so much in the beginning is what I remember.
Totally. No, he sounds really enticing. Like he's kind of got it all together.
Right, right. Like if I get paid, like he would always be in like this nice fitted suits when we got to work, like always very well dressed, well spoken. He seemed very like well traveled and worldly, just very wise, and like also kind of mysterious. Like that's the best way that I can describe him, is what I saw at first, which is what attracted me to him.
No, and I can totally see why it would, because it literally sounds like he's the full package.
Right.
Just like from the outside looking in, it's like, damn, he sounds like a nice guy. If you were to text me and be like, I met this guy, he's all these things, and be like, oh my God, he's bringing you flowers.
Yeah.
He's got shit together, all the things. I'd probably say, oh, you should pursue that.
Right, right.
So when did the red flags started popping up? When did you start to realize, maybe this man wasn't all he seemed to be? And maybe how long before you guys ended up in an official relationship?
I remember us kind of becoming more exclusive very early on. And the red flags that I would notice now, or that I would kind of like be more aware of now, I wasn't aware of back then.
Sure.
I was very much, it was more so like, okay, I see these things, but I don't care. I'm going to fight for this relationship because I really want to be with this person. Like, and so one thing that I remember is, at the time, during 2015, 2016, well, one of the things that I probably should have realized, let me backtrack. Our first date was when we had sex for the first time, and it was it's like everything seemed to be happening very, very fast. The intimacy, the sexual intimacy, the love bombing, all of those things. But back then, I didn't know what that was. I just thought, oh my goodness, this guy, like, who's so cultured and so worldly, like, he loves me, like, oh my God, he wants to have sex with me. Like, it made me feel special, right? Like, but back then I wasn't thinking of it as, these are kind of like red flags, like this should not all be happening right, like all at once, right?
Yeah.
And so that was one thing that I can say. And then I remember I wanted him to meet my best friend Joanne. At that point, she was still in Savannah. And I remember we were going to Gatsby's for Latin night. That was me and Joanne's thing. Every Thursday we would go to Gatsby's for Latin night. And he had come up to us. I think he had just gotten off work because he worked downtown as a bartender. He just got off work, and so he came to meet Joanne. And there was a guy inside that asked to dance with me. And Joanne was like, no, go. Like, I want to stay out here and talk to him. Like, you go dance, da-da-da. And I didn't think anything of it, because I was like, we're not really like official. I'm just going to, go dance with this dude while my best friend, kind of basically interrogates my love interest.
Sure.
Like, whatever, it's fine. But then after that, that's one thing that he held over my head through the entirety of our relationship. Like 5 years with this person, like he would still bring it up, how I basically ditched him on our first date or whatever to go dance with another dude. And I'm just like, really?
Wow.
Really, dude? Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Well, and especially too, something that really gets me is that it sounds like going to this place to dance was more of you and Joanne's
Yeah.
thing, and you invited him into this environment,
Right.
and then he twisted it to make it about him
Mm-hmm.
and held it over your head for all those years. That
Yep.
is crazy to
Yep.
me.
Yep.
So, okay. So that happened, and you said you were with him for 5 years.
Oh.
Can you kind of paint the picture of what that experience was like living with
Whew.
him?
So I remember when I met him, he was working downtown as a bartender. He
Mhm.
had a stable job. Even when I met him initially, we were working at the same company. So it's like I
Mm.
know this guy has work. He has a good work ethic. Whatever, he works. Well, there came a point where I was in my own apartment. I had moved in with my cousin because I was trying to get out of my studio apartment or my one bedroom apartment into a bigger apartment. And I was like, hey, if we move in together, we can split rent. It'll be cheaper, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, I just remember now, mind you, this is after a time period where I'm sorry, we wanted to give him a different name.
It's out there now. It's fine.
Where he basically ghosted me and
Hmm.
fell off the face of the earth, and I was trying to like contact him, and there was even a point where I went up to his mom's house because that's where we initially went after our first date where we had sex. That should have been another red flag. Went to his mom's house. I,
Oh.
I've never I can say this, in the time that I have known him, I've never seen him actually live in his own place. Period.
Oh.
So that should have been another red flag.
Heard.
And I remember like just going over to his mom's place and be like, "Hey, have you heard from him? Like I, da da da." And he was out in Atlanta, with his ex at the time, the one that he told me I shouldn't worry about, and all this and the third. He was staying with her, and then all of a sudden he comes back to me and just starts to hang around our apartment, mine and my cousin's, until he basically just lives there. Like he's there every single day, every single night, and it's fine, but it's like you're not helping pay anything, but then you're bitching about my cousin who's also like not really helping, but it's like, do you really have any room to talk because you're kind of living here and you're not helping, that
Yeah.
whole thing. So long story short, my cousin basically screwed me over and left because there was some arguments had between me and her, and she and her boyfriend at the time moved all their things out while I was at work and didn't give me any money for rent. So
Oh.
it was just me in this 2-bedroom apartment that I could not afford by myself, and he was living there also,
Hmm.
and we stayed there for, I want to say, two more years after that, I believe, 2 or 3. And I can say I paid all of the bills by myself for maybe 2.5 of those years,
Oh my
maybe 2 years, and that's including the time after we had our daughter because we were still in that apartment. I
Mm,
remember
oh,
him
okay.
actually finally getting a job like right around the time that I was having her. So,
So, okay, so a couple things.
mm-hmm. That's
Just to
a
be
lot.
no, 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 you're good. You're good. I'm processing it all. I'm like, wow, so many questions.
Yes.
Like, firstly, I'm sorry you had to go through that. I feel like the women listening, some of y'all can probably relate to some of this shit,
Yeah.
and it is no joke.
Yeah.
But I wanted to rewind a little bit and clarify. He was with his ex while you were in a relationship, and that's when he was ghosting you while you were in a relationship. Is that right?
If I'm remembering it correctly, which this was a long time ago, and some of these
Sure.
I kind of like blocked out of my subconscious because I was literally acting like a crazy person during that time. Like
Understandably so.
I was looking through his pictures on Instagram, and I was like psychoanalyzing all of the images. I'm like, where is this place? Like trying, because I had no idea where he was. I was like, where could this be? Like what? I was even.
trying to find him.
Yeah, I was trying to find him. I was even, texting pictures to Joanne to be like, have you ever seen this place? Like, do you know where this is? Like, I was acting like a crazy person, like obsessed. I was trying to find him. And I can't remember. I feel like in his mind, he thought that we weren't together, but his actions, in my opinion, were saying otherwise, because it's like, you're over at my house all the time. We're continuously having sex. Like, you tell me you love me and then you just leave. Like,
Okay, yeah.
right.
So like in a relationship when it's convenient for him.
Right.
I see. Okay. Well, and I feel like that is the kind of games that women get played on so frequently by toxic men.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I know women do it to men too. So like any men listening, I know it's not men, but like it's these instances that make women feel some type of way. But I feel like from what you've told me, and we'll get more into this too, so my listeners can kind of catch on. But from what you've told me, it was lots of these instances of him treating you this way, where you were constantly feeling like you were scrambling. And I mean, you're telling me right now, I was acting like a crazy person. But if you were in a healthy relationship, you wouldn't have ever had to do those things. So no one would ever have called you crazy. They would have called you concerned. They would have said, "Oh, it's normal for you to feel frantic. Where's your partner? You're looking for him." And yet, because of this gray area he created of we're together but we're not really together, then you're forced to carry this weight of, am I acting right if we're not really in a relationship? Am I acting right because we are in a relationship? Like it's very confusing.
Right.
And so like I'll say it again, you were acting in a way that is valid for what you were going through, right?
And I also remember at that point, hindsight looking back, that was a point in my life where I heavily relied on the opinions and love of other people to make me feel validated and make me feel loved. I hadn't yet gotten to the point where I had that love and happiness by myself. And so when it was almost like someone taking away their love and affection, I was chasing it. I wanted it back, because now, which we'll probably get into later, the Aaron now is completely different, which I know you know. But back then it was like the complete 180. I was so desperate to be loved, to have the love that I know that I give. And so when I felt like someone was moving away from that or trying to take their love away, I didn't want to let go of them. I wanted to chase them.
I can completely relate to that. And I'm curious, what would you tell the Erin back then, knowing what you know now? Like, what would you say to her if you had a chance to like sit with her on a couch or just, see her for a moment in that time? Like, what advice would you give to her in the middle of all that?
I would say to her, focus on yourself. The love that you want from other people, give it to yourself. I would tell her to remember who she is, remember how far she's come, remember all that she's endured, and to go after what is important to her.
I love that. And I think that's so important. That's something that I talk about a lot, is you have to fill your cup first so you can overflow onto the people around you. When you are pouring and pouring and pouring and you're not taking care of yourself, that's when I've noticed life starts to get really ugly, honestly. And some people might say, oh, it's selfish, but something I love about your podcast, Erin, something that I love that you've spoken on, is being selfish isn't bad. Being selfish is good. There's different kinds of selfishness, but at its core, being selfish doesn't have to be this bad thing, right?
Negative thing, right?
Right. And so when do you feel like things started to change for you? So I know you said, he kind of weaseled his way into your apartment. You're struggling to kind of make things work. And then you mentioned that you were pregnant and he started getting a job around the time you had your daughter. So can you kind of talk to us about that time period?
So for context, I'm going to go back a year prior to the year that I found out that I was pregnant with Jordana. A year before I was pregnant also. and I chose to have an abortion because I was, one, not mentally, financially, or emotionally prepared to be a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And my relationship with him was rocky at best. um I literally felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to bring a child into that environment. And that was one thing that he said he supported me on, but then afterwards held it over my head.
Mm.
And so when I found out that I was pregnant with Jordana, I had a conversation with myself. I still didn't feel ready to be a parent. I was the type of person that said I never wanted kids, and that really didn't change. It was happening to me, so I had to make a decision that was going to be best for me, right?
Sure. Sure.
And this is something that I know I've shared with you, but I haven't really shared it with many people, and I feel like it's because I was ashamed of it. But I think a lot of women fall in this scenario, and they need another example to show them that it's okay and that it doesn't make you a bad person.
Sure.
You know, to put it lightly, or to put it frankly, I was in an abusive relationship. I was in a toxic, emotionally and mentally abusive relationship. And when I found out I was pregnant, my mindset was, if I'm carrying his child, maybe he will be nicer to me.
Mm.
Maybe he will love me. Maybe our relationship will get better because we're raising this human together. So that's why I decided to have my daughter.
Mm.
Now, well, I'll let you go ahead because it sounded like you were going to ask me something.
Oh, no, no, no. You're good. I'm just, you have told me that before, and
Yeah.
it takes my breath away every single time. And I just want to say this now, that I'm very proud of you for everything that you've overcome and the woman you've become in spite of it all. And I also just want to say to my listeners, if you've been in a situation like this, or if you are in a situation like this, I just want you to know that you're not alone. And I think if I've learned anything from Aaron, and as we'll continue to learn through this episode, it's important to reach out, and I think it's important to ask for help. And I know that's not easy. I'm not saying that like, oh, it's so easy to get out of a situation like this, or a relationship, or yada, yada, yada. Or maybe you feel like you don't have a support system. Y'all know I've talked about that a lot on this
Mm-hmm.
podcast. But bringing Erin onto my show, I did this for a reason, because her story is so impactful, and she has been through so much. And I hope that whoever is listening to this right now takes this message as a message of hope, because as we continue to chat like with Erin and we hear more of her story, like, it is a story of overcoming. And so anyway, I'm going to stop rambling now. Carry on. So continue.
Yes. So all of that to say, I don't regret my daughter at all. She is
Mm-hmm.
the most amazing light of my life, and she saved my life on multiple occasions. She gave me the courage and the strength to stand up and make a change in my life, and to say, no, I'm not going to deal with this. Because
Mm-hmm.
even if, so one of the things that kind of always was in the back of my mind, especially after I had my daughter, was that I grew up with parents who were divorced, and
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted that for my daughter. But I had to sit with myself and understand that my daughter needs two happy parents, whether we're together or we're not. And
Mm.
I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking that this is what love is.
Wow. Mic drop. Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes, ma'am.
that was one of the deciding factors for me with ending the relationship with him, is just that I I don't want this to be the example of love that my daughter grows up and sees. I want her to have two happy parents, even if they're separated.
Oh my gosh, yes. And was that the moment that you decided I need to get out of this relationship, or was there kind of something else that led up to it, or was it just kind of a combination of everything?
Good question. So my final straw was, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was in the house that I'm currently in now. Mind you, this is my house that I'm renting by myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the only one on the lease, and
Yes,
it was
ma'am.
it was a time period where me and him were on and off, and so the on meant that he was over here all the time, and he wasn't helping paying bills, and he was basically
Mm-hmm.
living here, and all of those things. And we got into an argument. My daughter is asleep across the hall. It's a very small house, so sound travels. Even though my daughter can sleep through a fucking bombing, she is like once she's out. But still, um, I remember I was trying to get away from him because it was like a shouting match at that point. And I was like, I don't want to continue like fighting like this. And I go in my bedroom, and he comes after me, and he balls his fists up and put it like inches from my face and said, "I
Mm.
will fuck you up."
Oh. Oh
He
my
never
God.
put his hands on me, but just the simple fact that it came that close, I said to
Mm-hmm.
myself, if you would go that far, you would hit me,
Yes.
and I'm not going to give you the opportunity to do that. So that was the final straw for me. That's when I was like, cut ties, ended, you know. But then, of course, he slept on my couch for a month and a half afterwards until he finally got his own place, quote unquote, and moved out. I don't even know if he has his own place now or if he's living with someone, which he probably is because that's just how he gets by, in my opinion. Um, but I do know he lives fairly close to me because he gets Jordana every other day. But yeah, that was the final straw, and I think around that time I was developing more confidence in myself. I was just telling my current boyfriend the other day that he would always tell me, you never finish anything, you never accomplish anything, like you never accomplish anything that you start, you're so wishy-washy, you don't do this, you don't do that, like always criticizing me about something. But that was one thing that always stood out to me. He said, you never finish anything. And at that point in my life, I had just finished getting my EMT license and furthering my career.
Mm.
So I'm just like, oh, I never finished anything. Okay, like just
Watch me now.
right, just set out to do this and finish it, and I'm continuing to further my career. So that was like a big like fu, like to him. And that was all happening around the same time. And so I feel like slowly but surely I was developing more and more confidence in myself to know that, like, hey, I can do this. And during the whole course of our relationship, which I didn't mention, but you personally experienced, I believe, is that he made me feel like all I had was him.
Mm-hmm.
I literally shrunk my friend circle down to the point where I only had him. I wasn't talking to Joanne anymore. I was barely talking to you. I was hardly talking to my friend Lauren. Like I literally only had him. And so it made it so hard in those times where I wanted to run or I wanted to leave, to feel like I could, because I felt like I didn't have anybody, even though I knew in my heart that that wasn't true. But I felt embarrassed because everybody around me saw the type of person that he was, but I didn't see it. I want your listeners to understand that that's normal. I've talked about it on my podcast too. When you're in an abusive relationship, it literally alters the chemistry, the makeup of your brain. You lose brain cells. You are not able to make sound, rational decisions. So if you're going through something like that, it is completely normal.
No, absolutely. And, we have talked about that a little bit before. And if you're comfortable sharing, I was hoping maybe you could dive a little bit deeper into the things that he would say about your friends, because I remember you mentioned it that one time where he would, plant seeds in your mind to make you feel some type of way about your
Mm-hmm.
friends.
Yeah.
And I think, maybe it would be helpful for my listeners hearing from you, the things maybe they should look out for.
Right. So, of course, one, he blamed Joanne for me leaving him, outside while I danced with another guy. So that was one thing that he never liked her about. And Joanne is my best friend. That's my ride or die.
Mhm.
Lauren, I met through Joanne, and I remember her coming over to the house one day, and Lauren is a very like free spirit, even more like open and frou and la la than I am. She's like way more out there, and so she has this kind of energy about her. And he would say stuff after she would leave, like, that's how you let your friends talk to you, or that's the time, like, just little things like that kind of almost degraded or shunned the fact that I was in a friendship with this person. Like, how could you be friends with someone like that, kind of, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the things that were said about my friends to make me kind of like. And because, so this is how this works. So your significant other who is narcissistic, and you're in this relationship with them, even though yes they're narcissistic and they make your life hell, or what have you, you still seek their approval. And so
Yeah.
that's how it can turn around to, oh well, I'm gonna not speak to my friends because my significant other doesn't approve of them. That's how that happens, because you want their approval, not your friend's approval. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, because 9 times out of 10, or I would say for most people, your significant other is sharing a bed with you. Like,
Right.
of course, you're going to regard their opinion
Right.
highly. And when your significant other is talking down on your friends, I mean, especially I would say in the beginning of a relationship, when you are still in that kind of honeymoon phase, you want to impress them, you want their validation, just like you said. I mean, you're soaking in every single thing that they're telling
Right.
you, and when they start planting those seeds and making you question, it is hard. Even if you're not with a narcissist, even if you're not in an abusive relationship, it can be difficult to stand up for yourself
Yes.
or even for your friends, even though that sounds
Yep.
horrible.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, okay, so you have Jordy, and then you experience your last straw with
Mhm.
him. What does life look like now co-parenting with him?
So that first year after we split up was hell for me. I'm not gonna lie, because it seemed like he was doing everything in his power to not help me, other
Mhm.
than just splitting daycare costs with me. But it's like, if I needed him to watch her an extra day because I wanted to pick up a shift, or if I was late getting off, or maybe I just needed an extra day so I could breathe, because mind you, at this point I'm actually an EMT working on an ambulance. I don't have that much time to decompress before I have to get my child, and I have to tend to her needs. Like, it's a lot. But
Yeah.
it was like he tried everything to just make my life a living hell as much as he could, to the point where he was also threatening to take Jordana from me,
Mm-mm.
which, now looking back at it, I know he couldn't do, because even if it went to the court, the judge would probably laugh in his face, like, are you serious, bro? Like, you don't have a stable job, like, you're bouncing from job to job. Your Her mother is an EMT, a stable like figure in this community. She has the child more often than you do. Like, come on, like, the math ain't mathin'. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, that first year was hard. Now I feel like we're kind of getting to a place where we can be cordial, but
Mhm.
it's always hard to gauge with him, because in the back of my mind I know that he only does things when it benefits him. He's only nice to me when he wants something. And so sometimes I feel like, okay, maybe he's being a little bit extra nice to me because he maybe wants to get back together, or maybe he's being a little extra nice to me because he's going to ask me for something. It's hard to gauge what his motives are, because my motives have just always been to, hey, can we get along as two individuals who are co-parenting this amazing child, so that we, like, at least can like communicate when it comes to her, that's all I ask, you know. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's so hard. Especially just with your past experiences with him and knowing how he works and all the things.
mhm. uh,
I'm
I
just like
also
thinking about
wanted
everything you said.
I also wanted to point out, after I left the relationship, I had to suffer a huge like mental fuck, because
Mm,
I had to basically deconstruct my brain from all of the brainwashing, all of the negative ways of thinking about myself, about others, all of these things that he told me that I believed that I knew weren't true. For instance, um, so backtrack to when I was pregnant with Jordana. I was about maybe 5 6 months pregnant at this time. I was still working in retail at Victoria's Secret. I was working 40 hours a week, pregnant. I was the only one working and paying the bills. Okay.
mm,
He did not have a car at this time. He was using my car. He would drop me off at work. And, you know, when you're pregnant, you have to get, you know, checkups every month. And they called me and said, "Hey, we have results of your blood work and your urine sample, da da da. Give us a call when you can." So I called them and they told me that I had tested positive for chlamydia
mm,
while I was pregnant. And he
mm.
somehow convinced me that he did not cheat on me. And I don't know, this goes back to the, you know, you can't make sound decisions when you're in a relationship like that with someone like that. I don't know if it's just that I was pregnant and I had made this decision and it was just like I cannot do this by myself. So it had to be true. It had to be true that he didn't cheat on me, because otherwise, like, I wouldn't be able to do this, or that I was just that oblivious, you know. But after I ended things with him, I had to, you know, think back to all of these things and be like, bro, like, he literally cheated on you and you like, you just believed him, you know. And it was hard because it's like, Aaron, you know better. Like, what the fuck, what is wrong with you? It was so hard not to beat myself up about things that I allowed and just put up with during that relationship. It was so hard. So it was a lot of, you know, not only navigating co-parenting with him, but also kind of like just deconstructing my brain and getting back to me. I spent a lot of nights crying. I spent a lot of nights, you know, asking myself why and all of these deep questions, just to like get back to me, you know.
Well, and that's so difficult too. I mean, not only are you healing from this abusive relationship, but you also just entered motherhood.
Right.
And for those of you who don't have kids, uh, motherhood, I mean, I say it all the time, motherhood is crazy. Like, it's
Yeah.
beautiful, it's wonderful, but it's also crazy and it's hard. And especially if you struggle with any kind of postpartum depression,
Mm.
psychosis, anxiety, it makes it that much harder. And then, thinking about Erin's situation, now she's a newly single mom healing from a traumatic relationship. I mean, girl, you were just
Yeah.
surviving. I mean, you were surviving through your relationship too. You talk about how could I have allowed all that to happen? But I think you're right. Like, you're navigating all of these hard things. You're navigating life. And on top of it, you have this person who's supposed to be supporting you, who's supposed to be your partner,
Mm.
but who's really just working against you. Like,
Right.
it's no wonder it's all just like a blur, right?
And
And
to this day, he denies cheating on me. He will never admit
mm,
it. He will never admit it.
I actually remember when you texted me about that situation.
Mhm.
I do. I remember you texted me. And I just remember being dumbfounded.
Yeah.
Like, well, first off, cheating's not okay
Right.
anytime ever. But to cheat on your partner when they're in the most vulnerable stage of their life of being pregnant, carrying a child, creating life, you are just the lowest of the low, slimiest
He
person ever.
he
And for him to continue to
right.
deny it, like,
He tried to say
excuse me?
he tried to say that, oh well, that's not the only option. Like, as if I
What?
cheated on him, bro. I'm 6 months
What?
pregnant. I'm working 40 hours a week. When you have my car? When do I have time to cheat on you? Like,
I was gonna say, I don't have time to be sleeping
right.
around, you fool. Oh my
I
goodness.
just remember my pregnancy. Everybody kept telling me this should be the happiest time of your life. You should be feeling so loved and so, just beautiful and joyous. The only time that I felt happy was when I was at work. When I was at home
Mm,
with him, I was crying almost every day. We were getting in fights. It was just, it was horrible. Like, he even tried to make my baby shower about him. Like, I invited him to go to the baby shower. He declined, but of course, if I'm going anywhere without him, he has to like blow my phone up or make a big stink so that he puts me in a bad mood. It was all about control over him, or control
mm,
over me for him. It's like,
sure.
if he can't, control my actions, then he's going to try to control my mood, my energy, my, something. So,
Absolutely. No, that's so sick. And again, I'm so sorry that you had to go through all of that.
yeah.
So, just, you know, for the sake of a timeline,
Hmm.
Jordy is almost 4. You've been away from him for what?
Uh,
That whole time, about, right? About 4 years now?
I would say almost 3, because think
Almost.
I think I ended the relationship right as I was testing out for my EMT license, and I'll be this October. Well, this November will make 3 years, so about 2.5 years that we've been separated.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, so still, you got a few years under your belt.
right.
What has life looked like for you in terms of one, being
Mm-hmm.
independent, it's just your name on this lease. You've been a single mom for a couple years now. And what has the healing looked like for you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always been very independent, which is crazy to me how I allowed anybody to like make me feel, those type of ways. But now I understand, like, I hadn't fully, come into my own, or like loving myself, and I didn't have these tools to help me get there. And in a way, it's not all bad, because the what I experienced with him helped me get to the point where I can stand up for myself, where I know, hey, I never want this type of thing ever again. So now I know what to look out for. Now I know red flags. Now I know, personality traits that, can be triggering, or things like that. So in a way, it kind of helped me come into my own, because I feel like I got a fast track to doing that. Um,
Sure.
and so I love having my own place. Nobody can tell, nobody's nitpicking, how long the dishes are in the sink, how long it's been since I've swept the floor. Nobody's calling me dirty or filthy. Nobody, just I feel free being in my own place with my daughter, and just being able to do what I want, basically. Like, having that freedom. As far as healing goes, that kind of that took a while also. I was in a few relationships after that, and I could still feel myself chasing after that love and attention.
Mm.
And I would kind of beat myself up every time that I noticed that I was doing it after the fact. But then I would realize that with each situation, I would get better and better at recognizing the flags, at recognizing the behaviors, and not only in others but in myself. Like, okay, I'm
Mm.
getting too attached right now. I'm relying too much on this person right now. Maybe I need to like take a step back and things like that. So it's kind of like practice makes perfect, even though, it sucks that the practice has to be in like relationships. But I mean, I was broken by a relationship, so the only way to move forward is through practicing through relationships.
Yeah, it's almost like a trust fall.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, you're going to be broken by those relationships, but if you don't continue to try and put yourself out there and allow yourself to be vulnerable, how are you ever going to learn that relationships can be good?
right.
So, I actually was hoping we could dig a little deeper into
Yeah.
that. After leaving him and being in that abuse for so
Mhm.
long, what was it like entering a new relationship? Was it were you I'm trying to think of how to word this. Were you eager to get back out there? Um, did you feel good at first and then it kind of would spiral, or like tell me about what it was like getting back out there?
So there were periods where I was just pissed off and didn't want anybody to talk to me, much less look at me, especially dudes. Like, don't even look at me. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
interested. Don't fucking talk to me. Like, and then there were times where I was more open and excited. It just depended on, I guess, how my love life was at that time, because normally the pissed off mode was like right after, a relationship ended, or, it went badly or went south. And then the more time that I got to myself, and the more time I spent just by myself, I kind of started opening up and being more open to the idea of trying again. Yeah.
So do you feel like in your singleness is when you started to bloom?
Oh my God, yes. I made a decision. This was after, let's see, this was almost 2 years ago. So a little after I had ended things with Jordana's father. And I made the decision, I'm just gonna be single for however long, because I'd always been that person that was like a serial monogamous. Like, I would end a relationship, and then like I would always say, okay, this is really the time, guys. This is really the time that I'm going to like be single. I'm gonna give myself time. I'm gonna heal. I'm gonna do all the things, and then a month later, I would be in another committed relationship. Like, I never gave myself that time to just be with myself. And
Mm.
so the year of 2021, I said, fuck it. Like, I'm just going to do things that I enjoy. I'm gonna be by myself. I'm gonna go out with my friends. I'm gonna do all the, like, I'm going to literally like focus on me. And that was one of the best years of my life. Like, I did so many things. I went to concerts. I went out with my friends. I checked off a huge thing off of my bucket list, which was to see the Phantom of the Opera in New York City on Broadway. Like, I
Mm.
experienced so much in that year that just instilled so much confidence, and just, confidence in myself as a woman, but also confidence in my decision making, being able to make decisions and move in a way that benefits me, to do things that make me happy, that fill my cup. It was an amazing year for me. And I feel like that's when I really started to bloom and just really focus on myself first.
I absolutely love that. And I actually have some women in my life who have struggled with being able to be single. And it's conversations I've had with them where they've said, I want to make this
Mm,
decision. I know it's what I need, but it's just like you said, you end a relationship and then a few weeks later you're in a brand new
yep.
one. When you made that decision to be single and to focus on
Mm,
you, what was the change that kept you committed?
mm. I think at that point, I was just so tired of relationships, like romantic
Mm.
relationships. I was so tired of men. I was just over everything. I was just like, I don't even want a man to be around me at this point. Like, I had just suffered so much trauma. I had been played so much. I was just, I was over it. I was over it. And I was just fed up at that time. And I remember saying to myself, I, in order for me to be in a relationship, I have to enjoy his company more than I enjoy being by myself.
Mm. Oh, that is good.
Yep.
That is real good. No, and I think that is so relatable to so many. I think it's normal. I know it's
Mm,
normal as humans that we are going to want a partnership. We were built for community, but it all comes back to you have to fill your cup up first.
mm,
And if you are not confident, if you do not have that self love to fill your cup, regardless of what's happening around you, regardless of who is around you, you are going to find yourself empty. And that is the story that I hear over and over again. From my girlfriends is just like their partners are draining them, but what's the missing key isn't something their partner needs to do differently. It's that they need to set that boundary. They need to fill up their own cup and make it a priority.
right.
And so best year of your life, what do relationships look like now that you have that mindset of, you know, I need to focus on me, I still need to take care of
Yeah.
me, but also maybe I don't feel that men need to stay the fuck away.
So after that, I could feel myself opening up a little bit more, and I actually was in a committed relationship the following year. We started seeing each other May 2022,
Mm.
and it was great. Like it was going very well, and I felt like I had found my perfect match. I felt like I didn't have to compromise on anything. Like everything just flowed so well. We were in a long distance relationship, you know, for context. So we didn't see each other every day. We maybe saw each other, I don't know, at best 2 days out of the month, maybe four, just depending on how things lined up. But towards the end of our relationship, he just ghosted me, fell off the face of the earth, to the point where I was literally calling hospitals in the area and being like, hey, do you have this person like in your hospital? You know, I was that concerned. And it just got to a point where, you know, I would communicate with him and say, hey, you can't do this. Like, I know you're going through a hard time, or, you know, whatever he told me. I said, that's all valid, but you can't, like, we're in a relationship, we're in a partnership. You can't just fall off the face of the earth and not tell me anything. Like, if you need time, like, tell me that, but don't just ghost me, you know? And
Well, and for context for my
yeah,
listeners, he was ghosting her for weeks at a
right,
time, not just like a
right.
day.
Weeks at a time, yes. So yeah, the first time that it happened, I think it was exactly like 2 weeks, I believe. And he finally
Hmm.
contacted me again, and you know, that's when I said, hey bro, you can't do this, like that, this is not okay. And then, you know, we came to that real, you know, that common ground. But then he did it again, like a week prior, or a week
Hmm.
afterwards. And after that, like, I really had to sit with myself and go through a lot of questions in my mind, and kind of playing devil's advocate as well, because I'm the type of person that tries to see people's, like, everyone's side, including my own and other people's
Sure.
experiences, and kind of like make a sound decision based on that. And I just had to tell myself, you know, I communicated with him, I did everything that I could, I set my boundaries and I set my expectations, and now he's making a choice. And so
Hmm.
January 1st, I said to myself, I'm not bringing this energy into the new year. And I ended things. And so for me, I feel like, yes, I'm still going to have ups and downs in relationships. No relationship is going to be perfect. There's still going to be men out there that play me and take me for a ride or what have you. But the difference is, the old Aaron would have stayed. The old Aaron would have let him ghost me however long he wanted, just because I wanted to be loved. I wanted to be with someone. I wanted to have a relationship. And the Aaron now knows her worth a lot more, knows the red flags, and makes herself and her daughter a priority first.
Hmm. Yes, ma'am. I love that. And you know, as your friend watching from the outside, looking in, it has just been so wonderful seeing you grow. But I think something people forget is that growth is hard. Like,
Yeah.
growth comes with growing
Yeah.
pains. It gets ugly at times. Like, I feel like I've seen you at some of your worst moments, but if you didn't have those moments, those hardships, you wouldn't be the woman you are today. And I feel like that's what this episode is such a great example of, is overcoming and evolving, and you know, like polishing and sculpting yourself into this brand new
Yeah.
person, but also not fully brand new, because everything you went through gave you
Mm.
wisdom. Like, that didn't just get left
Right.
behind, you're bringing along all this
Yes.
wisdom. So, you know, you talk about now the new Aaron isn't just going to stay and be strung along. The new Aaron knows the red flags and all the
Mm-hmm.
things. What would you tell my listeners? How can they get better at that?
Mm.
How can they put more tools in their tool belt without necessarily having to maybe be
Go.
in a 5-year relationship with a
Right.
narcissist?
Right. I would say the sooner you get into personal development, the better. I noticed
Mm,
a huge shift in my mindset just by adding that little piece into my narrative. There's tons of great books out there. I know, Lex, you've shared some on your podcast, and we can put some, come up with a list after the show and put it in your show notes. But that's the thing that
absolutely.
really helped me. Also, therapy. You don't have to. You
Mm,
don't have nothing has to be necessarily wrong for you to go to therapy. There were times, especially when I was working in my EMS field, just starting out, I felt so overwhelmed and it was crushing me every single day. And I went to therapy just so I could get organized, not to work through anything mentally, emotionally. I was just like, I need better organization. Please help me. Like, so
yeah.
nothing has to be crazy wrong for you to go to therapy, but, just sitting and talking to someone helps, especially someone who is unbiased. Like, has no ties to you whatsoever than to just sit and listen to you rant for an hour. That does wonders. And coming out of my abusive relationship, that's the first thing that I did. I went to therapy, and I can't remember the exact book. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pull it up right now. But this book was all about narcissism, or
Mm,
like not really narcissism, but being codependent, which you
okay.
don't necessarily have to be in a narcissist relationship to be codependent. Remember, I said earlier, I was dependent on other people for validation, for love, for, all of these things. And so this book really taught me how to find that in myself and not be so codependent on other people. So it's called How to Stop Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. And
Perfect.
I'll send that to you so you can put that in your show notes. But that was the first really like taste of personal development that I had, and that was recommended to me by my therapist, and it changed my life. And so ever since then, especially with me and Lex, we were in the network marketing business together. We got first hand experience to a lot of personal development, and I know you speak about it all the time, but it literally changed my mindset when it came to those things.
Well, and piggybacking off of that too, and if you're an active listener of the show, you're gonna say, "Oh, here she goes again." But personal development is so important because what you feed between your
Yes,
ears is everything.
absolutely.
Like when you are alone with your own thoughts and you're just thinking the same thing over and over and over again, it can get kind of hectic. So if you fill some of that space with positivity,
Mm-hmm.
encouragement, hope, goals, a different perspective. I mean, I've personally grown so much as a person just by hearing someone
Yes,
else's point of view. But you're not always going to get different point of views if you
right,
either A, only focus on yourself, or two, only on the people in your
right.
circle. So there's so many benefits
Yeah,
to it.
because I can easily say, oh, what helps you be better at that is to just set boundaries. I can easily say that, but if you don't have the tools to set boundaries, if you still feel like you're being selfish or you still feel guilty for setting boundaries, then you're not going to do it. So therefore, that piece of advice does absolutely nothing for you. So personal development is where you have to start, because that's where you develop those tools to be able to stand up for yourself, to be able to set boundaries, to be able to move forward through grief, through all of these things, because it literally shifts, it changes your mindset. Because remember, especially if you're coming out of an abusive relationship or what have you, it alters your brain chemistry. So you have to alter it back, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, it's a whole process. And so much of this stuff is skills, and they're not skills that we're often taught at
No.
home or in school. So we have to seek them out to learn them. But I think that can be really encouraging because I know for me, and this is again just completely personal to me, I won't speak for anybody else, but there was a time in my life before I had grown into who I am today where I felt ashamed or embarrassed if I didn't know how to do
Mm.
something. And it's like I believed I should have popped out the womb
With
just
all this knowledge.
being an emotional
Yes.
intelligence or setting boundaries or what have you. And that was my demise. It was really my ego getting in my
Mm.
way. And when I set my ego aside and I said, no, 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 I'm allowed to be a beginner. There's nothing wrong with not
Mm-hmm.
knowing. That's when things started to change, when you allow yourself to grow into that knowledge. And that's okay. So I guess I'm saying that for anybody who's listening, if you're one of those people who's like, oh, I don't need help, I can do it myself, I don't need therapy, I can, psychoanalyze myself, I don't need this, I don't need that, set your ego aside for a second. What if you allowed yourself to feel safe asking for help? How could that change your life?
Absolutely. And the thing I always get back to is like, I have training in all types of things, but I'm not a trained therapist. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Like, I need help in that area. I'm trained to, stop bleeding. I'm trained to give certain meds. I'm trained to give you oxygen. I'm trained to, sell things to people, but I don't know how to rewire my brain. The fuck?
Yes. And why don't we take some of that pressure off of our own plate? Do we really need one more thing to have to be the expert of, or can we give that to somebody else? Right?
Absolutely.
Amazing. I am just loving all of this. Erin, we are coming up on an hour though, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I wanted to thank you again for coming on here. Your message is so powerful. We might have to do a part 2 because there's so many things that I want to dive into and get your perspective on and all the things. And I just know my listeners going to adore you, but where can my listeners connect with you?
So you can follow me on Instagram at AIR_WREN. I did have a separate IG for my podcast, but I think I'm going to merge those two, especially with me starting paramedic school this week. It's just going to be too much for me to juggle both. So that's my main one. Also, I have a link there where you can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook, all of those things. So that's kind of like the main thing that I send people to.
Perfect. And then she also has her podcast, Your Spiritual Guru, which you can listen to on Apple or Spotify. And then finally, the question that I'm asking all of my interview guests is, what's a song that gets you through tough times? Like, what's that song you can go back to over and over again?
This is a song that was recently sent to me. I want to say maybe a few months ago by a friend. She said that whenever she listens to it, she thinks of me. And when I heard it, I was just like, oh my God. So this is my song to remind myself who the fuck I am. So it's called Power by Little Mix. And that is just such a hype, it's all about you're the man, but I've got the power. Like, it's such an empowering, girl power song. And I love it. I'm actually probably going to listen to it today.
I love it. No, I'm literally going to play that after we get off of here. I'm going to add it to the podcast playlist. And for anyone who's interested, I'll make sure and link it in the show notes so we can all feel like badass, powerful women today. Amazing. Well, thank you again, Erin, for hopping on. I love you so much, and I really appreciate you taking time. Awesome. All right. We'll talk to you guys next week.